Right, right. Welcome to part four of our um, investigation. So far, we've come up with an investigative question that we're interested in. We have defined the variables, and we have um, decided which one is the explanatory and which one is the response variable. We've then created our graphs with our scatter graphs, and we are now looking at the analysis of those graphs. So, what do we look for in scatterplot? Now, an easy acronym to remember is to always try to use TASGU. Now, TASGU is basically a framework so that you can try and remember the important features to look for. Now, the key things are the ones in capital, TAS, are in every scatter graph you look at, and G and U are in lowercase because they're only sometimes applicable or there's features that we can find. So, first of all, T stands for trend, and it's what do you see, whether the trend is a straight line or not, or is it a non-linear trend where it curves. So you can see in this graph here that we've got points in the bottom left and the top right, and we don't have any points in the top left or the bottom right. And generally the lines are in straight, so we say that that's a linear trend. This one here is still a trend, but you can see that it curves, that it's not a straight line, so a non-linear trend. It can be sometimes difficult to see the difference between them, and with most of these things that you do with analysis, as long as you've got a clear reasoning, you can just about explain anything. So A in TASGU stands for association, and association just means whether it's positive or negative, and a positive association has points in the bottom left and then to the top right, and then a negative association has points in the top left and the bottom right. There's some conclusions we can draw about those associations, but we'll talk about them later on. The key thing with the analysis is that we identify what we've got, and then in our conclusion, we decide what the meaning is. So the next part, S in TASGU, stands for scatter, and also in some, and also you could remember it means strength as well. So there's two key things that we look for the strength. So how strong is the relationship? So you can see this graph here is got a strong relationship. It appears to look like a line, or the one that we have over here is a weaker relationship that's still in a general shape of a line, but you can see that it's not as tightly packed. Now, obviously, there's points in between where we can have a moderate relationship, which is somewhere stronger than that, but also weaker than this one. Down the bottom, we've got the scatter, and you can see constant scatter means that it's our relationship's about the same width along the way. This one here is an example of a fan, but it starts off tightly packed, and as it moves further and further up, it gets further and further spread. The important thing for this, where we have non-constant scatter, is it might be that a relationship can be form stronger or more accurate predictions using at lower values, and at higher values we may not get as stronger predictions. The G and the U stand for outliers, so things that are and groupings. So outliers need to be away from the relationship. You have to be really careful that we don't call things like this an outlier, even though they're in two separate groups, because they still fit the same pattern. So that's TASGU, and it would be a good idea to make sure you make a note of this page. These are the things that come back to you, that you'll have to come back to, but it's obviously in your booklet as well. So as far as what you need to do is we can take a look at our data sets now, and we can start to look to see whether do our analysis. And you can see this is the analysis for this graph, our first data set. And you can see it has a linear trend, and you can see it's roughly a straight line. That this has this graph has a negative association because it's pointing downwards from left to right, or it has points in the upper left and the bottom right. The relationship is moderate in strength. That's also relative to what you're classing as being strong or weak. This could be stronger than another one. It could also be weaker. But since there's quite a lot of scatter there, I've decided to call it moderate. What you couldn't call this is a weak relationship, and you couldn't really call it strong either. The scatter and the scatter seems even. It's roughly the same width all the way along. The graph is one big group. There's no separate parts, even though we have this one point out here. Now, the important thing there, and is a common mistake, is that in the past many people have said that this point here is an outlier, and that's not the case. The reason why it's not an outlier is if I was to continue this line on, it would generally be in the right spot for the relationship. So we can't call it an outlier. For there to be an outlier, I would expect it to be here or here. Right, so we talked about the trend already, that it's a linear trend. What you need to do now is pause the video and then go on for the other data sets that you graphed. Decide on whether it's a linear relationship or not a linear relationship. Once you've finished, press play on the video and we can go through the answers. Okay, so looking at the second data set, okay, we're going to say that this is a linear trend. All right, this is very close to being a non-linear trend because there is some curvature as it goes along there, but it's relatively a straight line that we can run between those two. Looking at 3, the rugby players, again, a linear trend. There's no real points in this area. There's no real points in this area. We can run a line in this direction. Right. Marathon times, linear trend. Fork length versus total length. We can say that's a linear trend. And then the last one, we're going to say that there's no trend. Now, the reason why there's no trend is that even though we've got these outliers that's out here that have stretched out our scales, that actually this grouping here, I could equally put a line in this direction or this direction or this direction, and it would look in place. So there is no trend for that relationship. Okay, now looking at the association. So for our example, we have that the graph has a negative association because it's pointing downwards from left to right. So again, go to your booklet on page 7 and complete the association section for each of your data sets. And then once you're finished, pause the video and then press play once you're ready to look at the answers. Okay, here we are for data set 2, negative association, pointing down from left to right. If we look at the rugby players, it's positive association, pointing upwards from left to right. Marathon times, negative, pointing downwards from left to right. And fork length and total length, positive association, pointing upwards from left to right. We've already said there is no association for the mother's age and baby weight. Strength. Strength, we've said this is a moderate strength. So again, pause the video and then on page 7, fill in your answers and then come back and we'll check the answers when you're ready. So, number 2, engine size. We've got a moderate relationship, probably a pretty less strong as the previous graph, but we can still say it's moderate. You certainly wouldn't say it's a strong relationship, but you possibly could say it's a weak one. The rugby player's weight and height, I'm going to say that's weak. Okay, and then you can see there's much more scatter in this one. Marathon times, I'm going to say this is strong in strength. Okay, there's much less scatter and it fits a straight line much more nicely. The next one, fork length and total length. I think you can guess this one straight away. That's strong as well. You wouldn't call that moderate. It's definitely strong as it appears to be a straight line. And obviously for the last one, it's not applicable because we've already said that there is no relationship. So scatter, we've said that the scatter appears to be even all the way along. So if you want to stop and pause the video, do your questions on page 8 for scatter, and then we'll move on and then come back. Right, second one. The scatter seems even. All right, rugby players, the scatter seems uneven. Okay, you can see it's more tightly packed in this part, and out here it's much it spreads out much further. You can see the marathon times. It's an even scatter. You can see with the shark lengths that it's very little scatter. And obviously in the last one, the data is very scattered as there is no relationship. Right, grouping. So here we're just looking to see if there's any gaps or separate groups, not just points on their own. So it appears to be one big group. Right, pause the video and then see what the answers are when you come back. Okay, question 2. There may be 2 groups here. So we're saying that that may be a group and that may be a group there, which sort of lends itself because it appears this one's coming down on this angle and this one's going on that angle. There may be 2 groups in there as well. Okay, so maybe around here and maybe here. One big group for marathon times, and there may be 2 groups. We may have some smaller sharks down here and a bigger group up here. And the last one is one big group. Okay, unusual features are outliers. No, we've said there's none. So this is, you don't have to write anything for this one, only if there's one that appears. So pause the video and then come back, and then we will go through the answers.